Hey there, folks. Hello, People Stack Tribe. The topic of the week is should leadership advice. You should do it this way. You should do it that way. What I like to call sometimes the color by number approach to upgrading your tech career, to increasing your potential as a leader. And at the end of the day, your career is not some color by number piece of quote unquote art. You want to make it a masterpiece. And if you want to make it your masterpiece, you have to do more than simply follow this should advice, this color by number. This worked for me, so everybody else should do it this way kind of approach. And I want to take a slightly different take on this today and talk about best practices. Because something that you may be thinking about is, well, okay, I get it. I need to make sure that I'm really calibrating the advice to my own career, my own situation, my own resources, my own personality, and apply it. But what about best practices? Like, aren't they called best practices for a reason? Like, shouldn't I follow the best practices, especially when I hear them from experts or when I hear them over and over again? Maybe you've read them in one leadership book after another. Maybe lots and lots of your colleagues are saying, yeah, this is definitely the best practice. It's not just that one person said to do it this way and, oh, hey, you should do it too. But it's more about there's data to support the fact that a particular practice has worked for many, many, many people. And perhaps there's even scientific research to do that, right? To support that a particular practice is going to have a very high probability of leading you towards success. But what I want to tell you as someone who has a PhD in IO psychology, who was a researcher for 15 plus years and helped develop some of the academic research around leadership and how you treat people at work, I have to tell you, yes, there are best practices out there, and yes, there are scientifically based best practices, but you still need to be aware of following the best practices blindly. Because if at the end of the day, your goal is to build your career, your life into a masterpiece that is your own, that you take ownership of it and you love it and it brings you joy every day, you're commanding a premium salary of at least $200K a year, you're creating a zen-like work-life balance, you're not going to do that if you simply just follow best practices. And you're definitely not going to do that if you follow them blindly. And so I want to give a few examples here because it's in the examples that we start to see, yes, there are values in best practices, but there's value in them, but that you really have to take your situation into account. So one of the things that I hear talked about again and again in terms of leadership chatter, what's a best practice for really building my team, building a thriving, high-performing team, and making sure that I'm building trust among my team members. And it's do one-on-ones, do regular one-on-ones with your team members, preferably weekly. And during those one-on-ones, you want to talk about not getting in the weeds of project status or things like that. You want to talk about their career development. You want to be there to support them. And that's the general rule of thumb, best practice in the leadership world, that's how you develop trust with people. There's certainly research to back this up, that how you develop trust with people is to have regular one-on-ones with them, to have that one-on-one time to develop that rapport. And this is one of those cases where the best practice isn't necessarily wrong, but the devil is in the details. In other words, it's not enough to simply show up however, and meet with your team members one-on-one every week. There is a science for sure, but there is also an art behind mastering one-on-ones. And so, yes, I absolutely suggest that you follow the best practice of having regular one-on-ones with every single one of your team members, preferably once a week. And you hold those sacred. You do not ever cancel them. If you have to reschedule, you explain to your team members why, and you explain how valuable they are and how valuable they are to you and how valuable your team is to you. Yes, do that. Do all of those things. But how do you get really good at running one-on-ones? You have to do them. And while, yes, there are also best practices in how to do that, a lot of it is going to depend on so many other different variables. To name a few, your own personality. To name another one, the personality of your team member. To name another one, the interaction between your personality and that other person's personality. Sort of that third person. I have twins in the family. We have twin cousins. My niece and nephew are twins. And my brother and sister-in-law often talk about the third twin. Whenever the two of them are together, I mean, anybody who knows twins knows exactly what I'm talking about. Whenever there's the two of them together, it's like, poof, and it creates this third twin, and it's chaos. And that's actually what's happening whenever you have an interaction with somebody else. There's your personality, there's their personality, and then there's the interaction between the two that is also going to play a role. That third person that's going to come out, that's going to play a role in that situation. What else is going to play a role? What are some other variables? How much rapport do you already have? How much trust do you already have with that person is going to determine how you act, how they react, and how well you can inspire them and motivate them, and what kind of conversations you're going to have, and how deep they might go, and what topics you might cover. And here's the thing too. This is where it's like, it's okay to break the rules sometimes. Normally we say stay out of the weeds during one-on-ones, but what if it's crunch time? You may have to get a little weedy. You may have to talk at least a little bit about what's going on in this project. How can I support you, especially if you're up on a tight deadline? A client or a customer is banging down your door saying, hey, we really need this fixed. And so it's an all hands on deck kind of situation. And so your one-on-ones may look a little different during that week, let's say, than they would on a week where it's not all hands on deck. So that's one example of, yes, follow the best practice. I'm not saying don't, but you have to take a look at the context, and you have to know when to break the rules. You have to know when to do that. And it takes that experience, and it takes that really just time in the saddle to understand and to master the science and the art of running one-on-ones. So another example of best practices. So let's talk about an example of being on the job market. So the way that being on the job market goes, if you were to think about it linearly, right? What's a best practice for how to win on the job market? It's step one, you get clarity on the jobs that you want. Step two, you build your network. Step three, you go on interviews. And that may be several steps, like 3A, B, C, D, E, F, G, especially if it's multiple rounds of interviews. Step four, you negotiate. So you negotiate all the things. And then step five, you celebrate. And you celebrate the new job. If you don't get an offer, rinse, repeat. And so, yes, this is generally a best practice. It's how we move through the job market. And this is just one of those things that's just, it's also culturally built in. Like, this is how the job market works. It's how people expect it to work. And all of the players in the game, the job seekers, the people who are hiring, the recruiters, and everyone else, the HR people who are the decision makers, all expect it to work that way. the job seekers are networking, that will first, get clarity on the job that you want, right? And then step 2, you network. Step 3, you interview. Step 4, you negotiate. And there are some sub steps along the way. So yes, it's a best practice, and it's what's expected. But here's the challenge with this one, with following a best practice blindly, is that it's not a completely linear process. It's not just like step 1, then move forward, step 2, then move forward, step 3, then move forward. That there is absolutely an ebb and a flow that happens when you're on the job market. And you have to take that into account as you're moving through and you're making decisions about what to prioritize and how to spend your energy and when and how to follow up with people, for example. And I mean, and I'm not just talking about, like, for example, you may have multiple balls in the air, right? So you may have multiple potential job offers where, one of them is in the first round of interview, and one of them is maybe this person, maybe it'll become a lead, maybe it won't. And then another one maybe getting closer to negotiating, right? So there's those balls to juggle. So it's not just step 1, step 2, step 3, because you're going to be at different phases in the job search and in the hiring process with different companies, especially if you're in the very fortunate case where you might get multiple offers. But even if there's only like one potential offer and you're not juggling a lot of balls that way, there's still a non-linearity, a circle. A circleness, but it's really more like it almost feels like chaos sometimes, because like if you were to just say, like, step 1 is clarity, right? Step 1 is getting clarity on the job that you want. It's not just that you like get clarity and it's done, and then you move forward from that and you don't continue getting more clarity. Like, as you move forward in the job market, you're still checking in. Oh, is this really the job that I want? Is this really the org that I want to work for? Maybe you're thinking about a cross-country move and then maybe you change your mind, or maybe you haven't decided that yet. So the clarity happens throughout the process. And then the networking piece of it. The networking piece of it is going to happen throughout the process as well, right? It's not just that you build your network and then it's done, right? So I think that sometimes people expect that it's going to be much more linear of a process, and it's not. And that's another dangerous thing about just kind of blindly following best practices without going with the flow and embracing the uncertainty, especially being on the job market, but embracing the uncertainty of one-on-ones as well. That you can't just follow the best practices blindly. Because what's going to happen in one-on-ones is you're not going to build that rapport. You're not going to build that trust, that umbrella of trust, as I like to call it, that would then surround you in all of your other interactions with that person. There's not going to be a trusting relationship if you just follow best practices blindly without really thinking about your situation, without really thinking about the interaction between your personalities and all of the other variables. And if you don't build that trust, then you're not going to build a thriving, high-performing team. And then you're not going to score any wins. You're not going to get recognized for those wins. And you're not going to be able to build the beautiful masterpiece that is the career that you know that you're capable of. But you're not really going with the flow. You're just following it blindly and following the best practices in a rote way. Same thing with when you're on the job market. If you don't really take a look and assess the situation as you're going through, and if you just treat it like a linear process, you're not going to win on the job market. You're not going to score interviews. You're not going to advance those conversations forward. You're not even going to get a chance to negotiate. And you're not going to land that next job, and you're not going to be able to upgrade your career and get to that next level. And you're going to stay stuck where you are in the land of, gosh, is this really it? Is this really all I have to show for in my career at the age of 30, at the age of 35, at the age of 40, at the age of 55? Is this really all I have to show for a 5, 10, 15, 20-year career? And that's where that's really the cost here. If you don't take into account the art of upgrading your career and if you just follow best practices. Let me give you one more example. So I'm just trying to think of the best example here. What an example to give. So the best way to ask for a promotion. So I talked about just kind of in general, I talked about one-on-ones, I talked about being on the job market. Let's talk about like what's the quote unquote best way to ask for a promotion. So the best practices here are a little bit more loosey-goosey because it depends on like what it is that you mean by asking for a promotion, right? It could be like, do you mean how do I position myself for a promotion? Yeah, that's different from the more direct, what is the actual conversation that I need to have? What are the words that I need to say to my boss when I ask for a promotion? And then there's kind of everything in between. And so this is where best practices can get a little bit tricky and dangerous also, because people assume that, okay, they're asking one question, but they're really asking another one. And so if you give them the answer to the question that you think that they're asking when they're really asking a different question, then the best practice is going to be completely useless. So if a client were to ask me, what's the best way to ask for a promotion? We can have a dialogue around, okay, what is it that you really mean by that? Tell me a little bit about what's going on. What have you done so far? What is it that you want? What is it that you really want? Okay, help me understand what's getting in the way of you asking for a promotion. And then I can guide the person, I can guide my client that way based on their responses to that question, to those questions. But when you're talking about like establishing best practices, there's no dialogue, right? Like even when we're talking about scientific research, that scientific research is, because it's scientific research, is based on hundreds, thousands, sometimes hundreds of thousands of people. And it's not really based on a dialogue with one person. It's based on what tends to work best over over a number of people of 1,000, 100,000 in this situation, right? So, and there's no consideration for what do you really want? Why is it that you want to ask for a promotion? What have you done before that hasn't worked? What have you done before that has worked? Are you asking me, do you want the exact words to say to your boss? Do you want a script that we can play out and practice? Or are you asking about really kind of positioning yourself? And what about talking to other senior leaders as well, besides your boss? Are you talking about asking your boss, or are you talking about, talking to senior leaders? All of this stuff isn't taken into account when we look at, say, the best practices or the scientific research, or somebody who's like written an article about this is the best way to ask for a promotion, or somebody in a Slack team where somebody asks, the RAND's leadership Slack is a great community, right? I think it's a community of lots of technical leaders who can support one another. It's great for that connection. But when you have that, sort of asynchronous, in Quora and Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn are like this as well. When you have an asynchronous kind of community where it's somebody asks a question, hey, what's the best way to ask for a promotion? It doesn't open up, it doesn't create the space for that kind of dialogue where that person is actually going to get the kind of help that they need and actually get the question answered that they're really asking. Like every once in a while in those kinds of communities, people will follow up, like, what do you mean by ask for a promotion? What do you mean by that? What have you done so far? Like sometimes in those communities, people will ask. But if somebody just posts like on Quora or in the RAND's leadership Slack or whatever it is, what's the best way to ask for a promotion? You're going to get everyone and their mother, even if that person has never gotten a promotion before, is going to weigh in on, oh, here's what you do. Because a lot of times those forums are driven by significance. that people want to like dive in and just answer the question. They want to show everybody how smart they are. Oh, I know the best way to ask for a promotion. Oh, I read this scientific article. I read this Harvard Business Review article about asking for a promotion, and this is the way that you should do it, getting back to the should leadership advice. And people are just diving in and answering that question without asking the original poster, without asking the OP, what do you mean by that? And really having a dialogue back and forth. So there's like, in that one question, it's a loaded question. What's the best way to ask for a promotion? In some ways, it's a loaded question because there are so many potential questions that person may potentially be asking, in addition to all of the other variables that are going to come into play. So that's another place where applying best practices can get a little bit dangerous, because you may be applying the exact wrong best practices because that's not actually the help that you need. It's not the question that you're asking. And a lot of times, if you're asking a question like, what's the best way to ask for a promotion? You may not even know why you're actually asking that. And it takes an expert. It takes somebody trained as a coach to help really dig and peel back the layers to figure out, why are you asking that question? Because that kind of question, or other questions as well. What's the best way to negotiate a higher salary? What's the best way to continually build my leadership excellence? What's the best way to build relationships and network? What's the best way to upgrade my career? What's the best way to earn a $200K salary? I want to earn more money. What's the best way for me to do that? Tell me how. We get it all the time on the calls that we do with potential clients. And we're not here to give away Band-Aids. We're not here to give away false best practices. We're not here to kind of guide you down a path just to feel significant. We're not going to use the conversations with clients and potential clients as a way to fill our egos. We're here to help. We're here to genuinely help and love on every single person who reaches out for help, whether it's a potential client, whether it's a current client, whether it's somebody in our network, a friend, a colleague, a family member. We're not just going to throw around best practices and say, go do it this way. I read this research article. I have a PhD in organizational psychology. I know the exact way to do this. When you asked one question. How can you possibly know what that person's real wants, needs, desires, problems, blockades are by them asking one question? And very often, like I mentioned, we're blinded by our own ambitions. We're blinded by our own obstacles, by our own personalities, by our own situations. And we're not able to see the kind of help we really need. We're not really able to see why we're asking that question, what's the best way to ask for a promotion? Because you may be asking it because you've tried to ask for a promotion 10, 20, 30 times, and your boss keeps blowing you off. You also may be asking it because you have the goal of getting a promotion in the next year, and you haven't started the conversations yet, and you want to know how to do that. Those are two entirely different situations. Entirely sets of quote unquote best practices are going to apply there. And what that's going to look like for person A versus person B, in terms of the actions that they take that are actually going to help them get there, are going to look very, very different. Let alone that we don't know about those people's worlds. We don't know about the worlds of person A and person B. What's going on outside of work? What's their personality? All of that. And we can't see that on our own. And certainly our friends, well-meaning as they are, colleagues, people in the Rance Leadership Slack, and people who are writing, scientific research articles, HBR articles, they're great. And the best practices are wonderful, but they're not going to be able to help you build your masterpiece. And there's also no way that you're going to build your career masterpiece, your tech career masterpiece on your own, because you're blinded by your own world. You need to have somebody else who's an expert, who has also guided tech managers on this path. Yes, I'm talking about us. That's what we do. That's what Rob and I do. For the last 5 years, that's what we've been focusing on exclusively, is helping our tech manager clients to build that career masterpiece their own way. Yes, applying the best practices, but making sure that also that they calibrate them to their needs. And when our clients ask us questions, we don't just dive in and try to feel significant and smart and say, I know how to do this. This is how you're going to solve it. This is the exact thing that you need to do. We really peel the layers back and find out, why are you asking that question? So at the end of the day, you're not going to be able to upgrade your career, command a premium salary of at least $200K a year, build a zen-like work-life balance, and have a life and a career that's just filled with so much joy and freedom and peace. You're not going to be able to do that on your own. You need somebody, you need an expert in your corner who can help you see those blind spots, who can help you to ask the questions that you didn't even realize you need to ask, who can help you apply the best practices to your situation. So if you're committed to upgrading your career and creating your career into a masterpiece, your masterpiece, it's time to book a call with us today, thepeoplestack.com/book. We're going to take a look at what's going on in your career right now. Like I said, we ask questions. Expect us to ask you questions on this call. And you're going to get so much clarity on this call, because we're going to ask you the questions that either you didn't think to ask yourself, or that perhaps maybe you were too afraid to ask. Maybe you were too blinded by your own ambitions, blinded by what's going on in your life. You're going to get so much clarity about what's going on right now and what's not working in your career. And a lot of times people hop on the call and they say, no, everything's fine. Do we challenge people on that? Absolutely. Because if you're watching this video, and certainly if you decide to book a call with us, there's something that's not working in your career right now. There's something that's frustrating you. There's something that's worrying you. There's something that's causing a little bit of anxiety or a lot of anxiety. There's something that is. That's why you're watching this. That's why you're taking the time to watch this. So on that call, we're going to get clear on what's not working and what is the source of that anxiety, of that frustration, of that fear. We're also going to get absolutely clear on where you want to go, because we've defined point A. We've defined where you are right now. Then step 2 is to define point B. Where do you want to go? What is the masterpiece of a tech career that you want to build? What does that look like? Not just what are your goals. What's your dream? What's your dream for your career? What's your dream for your life? So you're going to get so much clarity around that, because you've never asked yourself these questions before. You've never looked at your career like this before. And then we'll talk a little bit more to get a sense of your level of commitment, your level of, do you want to make a change right now versus wait a little bit? And if you're ready to make a change right now and you're committed to it, and we're 100% confident that we can help you get from A to B, where you are right now, to your dream career, then we're going to talk about all the details for how we can help you get there. What would having us as experts in your corner look like specifically for you? What are the details? And we talk about all of them, so that you can then make a decision whether or not you want to invest in yourself and really have the expert help that you know you need to build this masterpiece. But it's always your decision. So that's only if we're 100% confident. If we're not 100% confident that we can help you get there, then we're going to share resources with you. You know, if you're not already a member of the Rand's Leadership Slack and we think that that's something that's going to be helpful to you, we're going to let you know, how to join and how you can make the most of it, and what channels to get on and who to introduce yourself to. But for some people, that's not the way to go. You know, I see everybody now, Rand's Leadership Slack. Oh, what's that? Oh, I don't have to book a call. All I need to do is join the Rand's Leadership Slack. Okay. That's not why I'm sharing. I'm just giving it as an example. Because honestly, for some people, that may be a great way to go. But for other people, it's just going to lead you more down the rabbit hole of being stuck, staying stuck, and living in the land of career mediocrity. But the point is, if we're not 100% confident that we can help you, or maybe it's just that you're not ready to make a change, you're not committed to making a change right now, then we're going to map a plan out for you so that you can get ready and some action steps that you can take between now and when you are ready. And that's what the call looks like. So it's thepeoplestack.com/book. Make sure you book that call now because our slots really do fill up quite quickly, and you're going to want to grab a time that is going to work for you. But I guarantee it's going to be the most clarifying call. You know, we call them career strategy sessions, but they're also kind of like career clarity calls. It's like a clarity call. You are going to get so much clarity about what to do next. You're going to get so much information about deciding what's next for you in your career so that you don't have to stay stuck anymore. You don't have to settle for mediocre, because I know that sucks. It is a really sucky feeling to be a smart, motivated, technical leader and feel like you're settling. There is an insidious disease that is present in the tech community, and that insidious disease is fear of irrelevance. I know that a lot of you are secretly laying awake at night, wondering, am I just fading into irrelevance? Is all of the hard work that I put in, is it just for nothing? Is this all really it? What if this is as good as it gets? And you're fearing that you're just going to disappear into irrelevance. It is an insidious disease, and we are here to banish it by giving you, technical managers of the world, the strategies and systems and the support to build your career masterpiece, not anybody else's. So if that's what you want, go ahead and book a call with us today, thepeoplestack.com/book. So that's the message of the day, folks. It is, yes, follow best practices, but do not follow them blindly, and make sure you're following the correct best practices for the question that you're actually asking, because if you don't, you're just going to lead yourself more and more down to the path of misery, and feeling stuck. And we don't want that for you. We want you going on the upward spiral toward joy and gratitude and a life of freedom and abundance. So that is it for the day, folks. Have a wonderful, wonderful rest of your day, and we'll talk to you again really, really soon. Take care.